Hi, hello, and welcome to a very special INIM webinar, Moving Forward, Operation Desert Shield Desert Storm 30th Anniversary, where we want to recognize you and your service and where we'll dive into Gulf War illness research, focusing on what we've done and where Gulf War illness research is going. My name is Elizabeth Balvin. I had special projects here at the Institute for Neuro-Immune Medicine at Nova Southeastern University, and I am also a research program director at the Miami VA Medical Center. And I'm going to be your host today. We have some very exciting speakers joining us today from across the nation. Portions of this webinar have been pre-recorded, but we'll have a live 20-minute Q&A portion with our speakers towards the end. So please feel free to type in your questions in the Q&A panel box, and we'll do our best to answer all of them. But let's kick it off with a video featuring a Colorado Army National Guard Sergeant Callista Prill, who's a military officer with the 220th Military Police Company, and followed by U.S. Army Reserve Master Sergeant Teresa Alford, Area Support Group and Kuwait Housing Non-Commissioned Officer in charge.
Hi, I'm Master Sergeant Teresa Alford. I'm the Housing NCOIC for Area Support Group Kuwait. During Desert Storm, my job was an 88 mic truck driver, and I was with the 915th Transportation Company out of Council Bluffs, Iowa. I remember it coming out in the newspaper. My coworker asked me if I thought my unit was going to get called up, and I said no, and then 5 days later, I got the call. It was so important for me to go with my unit because I trained with them for 6 years. As a soldier, it's important that we stand together as brothers and sisters in arms because the picture is so much bigger than us.
Hello, my name is Sergeant Callista Prill. I'm with the 220th Military Police Company from the Colorado National Guard out of Denver, Colorado. So my family's involvement with Desert Storm was that my father was deployed over there. He was with the 8th Infantry. What started off for his career as from going from infantry to special forces, and that led later on to me also joining the military as well. So knowing that my father had served here for Desert Storm and now here I am on my own first deployment, it's just kind of full circle because not only is this my first deployment as it was his, but during the last few days in Kuwait, funny enough, he came across my company that I'm attached to, the 220th Military Police Company. So they had also been deployed to Desert Storm. So after I had just gotten done graduating at Fort Leonard Wood, finding out, hey, I'm going to be attached to the 220th Military Police Company with Colorado National Guard, and my father was like, you know, I ran across that company when I was in Desert Storm, and I was like, no way. Come to find out that company had been deployed here. So that was one of his first interactions with the National Guard, and just so happened to be that his own daughter is, attached to this unit. So it just really brings a full circle for both of us.
The Defense Visual Information Distribution Service has these videos and more in their video library. Just search Desert Storm 30th. During this pandemic, the INIM team has been working both remotely and in office to continue our mission, keep the momentum going of Gulf War illness research. And with that, we have a short video clip featuring some of our team members on the Gulf War illness research team.
Welcome, my fellow Gulf War veterans. My name is Jimmy Orocho. I represent the Institute of Neuro-Immune Medicine at Nova Southeastern University as a research associate. We want to hear from you. We need to hear from you. We understand that without a Gulf War veterans participating in research, there will be no research. So we need to hear from you. We want to hear about your thoughts, feelings, and ideas moving forward. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Precious Leaks Gutierrez. I'm the daughter of a Vietnam veteran. I'm also a researcher for Gulf War illness. To all my Desert Shield, Desert Storm veterans, thank you for your service. Then and now for those who have chosen to participate in research so that no one is left behind. Happy 30th anniversary, and let's continue to move forward.
Welcome. My name is Zena Kirby, and I'm the Program Manager for the Gulf War Illness Clinical Trials and Intervention Center, or GWICTIC, at the Institute for Neuro-Immune Medicine. Thank you for your service, and thank you all for being here today. It's been 30 years since the end of Operation Desert Storm, but we at the GWICTIC want you to know we are still working for you. We have studies across the country targeting areas of concern in Gulf War illness. So if you or someone you know was deployed to Operation Desert Storm or Desert Shield, please reach out to us today for more information on our research. And thank you again for your service.
Hey everyone, Bill Watts here. 1st Cavalry Division, 458 Sea Battery, Desert Storm veteran. Hopefully moving forward, we're going to find a better quality of life for the Desert Storm veterans, if not a cure. Let's keep our fingers crossed. God bless all the veterans that have served our United States military. Thank you.
To all the men and women who wear the uniform, we honor the sacrifices you have made for our country in the name of freedom and democracy, which is the fabric of our common bond as Americans. And while this is something that we should do each and every day on this 30th anniversary of Operation Desert Storm and Desert Shield, I wanted to take a moment to thank you for your service. And it's an honor to work with you each and every day. And with that, I wanted to introduce our first speaker of today, Dr. Kimberly Sullivan. Dr. Sullivan is a research associate professor at the Boston University School of Public Health, Department of Environmental Health. She is the principal investigator on a number of Gulf War illness studies, such as the Gulf War Illness Consortium, otherwise known as GWIC, the Gulf War Illness Biorepository Network, or BBRAIN, and is also the PI of GWICTIC. Dr. Sullivan, who needs no further introduction.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Kim Sullivan from Boston University School of Public Health, and I am honored to be here with you today to commemorate the 30th anniversary of the Gulf War. And just as a reminder, the Gulf War started when this larger country of Iraq invaded this much smaller country of Kuwait, and the US and its allies went in to free the Kuwaitis. And in fact, they did that very successfully with just 4 days of actual ground war. However, we also know that our veterans came back with lots of health problems that we now know are Gulf War illness. So our veterans have been suffering with Gulf War illness, about a third of all Gulf War veterans since their return. And I've been honored to do research with our veterans and to listen to our veterans over the years who told us that we should bring the leading researchers together to try to understand what the cause of Gulf War illness is and to develop treatments for it. And so I actually started the Gulf War Illness Consortium, which was a large consortia study that was funded some years ago now to bring all the leading experts in the field together. And you recognize some of these faces, Dr. Climas and others. And our main focus areas were to identify diagnostic markers for Gulf War illness and to develop treatments for it. And so how did we do? Well, we actually have found that 2 of our ongoing studies have found very good objective diagnostic markers for Gulf War illness. And of course, this is very important because our veterans have struggled with getting recognition of the illness because there hasn't been a blood test or a brain imaging marker, for example. So right now we have a brain imaging marker that shows about 90% effectiveness, identifying our veterans who meet the Kansas Gulf War illness criteria. And we have a very promising blood test of autoantibodies in the blood of our veterans. So these are central nervous system antibodies that we can pick up in the blood. And if we combine them together, we find that we're about 90% effective there as well, identifying which Gulf War veterans meet the Kansas Gulf War illness criteria. So we did pretty well there in terms of trying to identify diagnostic markers for Gulf War illness, and we're continuing to hone that. But we also learned a lot about the pathobiology that we're using to develop treatments for Gulf War illness. And we've also gotten many other studies funded based on our initial GWIC consortium. We also got 32 papers published from this consortium that are mainly available to our veterans for free on our website and our social media accounts. So you can go ahead and take a look at any of those. We also have gotten 2 additional consortia funded. So the one I'm going to tell you about today is the Boston Biorepository and Integrative Network for Gulf War Illness, or BBRAIN. and the GWICTIC, which is a clinical trials consortium that you'll hear more about from Dr. Klimas. And these are our websites below, so you can take a look at these consortia, and we are actively recruiting right now for these studies. Now, the Boston Biorepository Recruitment and Integrative Network for Gulf War Illness, or BBRAIN, is working very hard to build scientific collaborations within the Gulf War Illness research community. So again, we're listening to our veterans who said, why are you doing all these different studies and not all working together? And so this, in fact, is basically the entire field of Gulf War Illness researchers working together. And so we're collaborating. We're also sharing samples and data that we've collected in prior studies, these valuable things that we don't want to keep asking our veterans to give us again and again, things like cerebrospinal fluid, blood samples, DNA. So these are some of the things that have already been gotten in some of our prior studies that we will be sharing with other investigators. And we're including 10 study sites around the country so far to work with us on this repository network. Now, the BBRAIN is going to be a core resource for future biomarker studies. So we have a strong track record of translating our biomarker results from animal and cell studies into our clinical studies and into treatment targets, which of course is extremely important for our veterans who have waited a long time for this. And we also are developing a menu of available samples and data that investigators can request on our website, and that will be sent to our steering committee for approval once to make sure that they are appropriate requests of the use of these very valuable samples from our veterans. And this is the type of menu that we have available now. So we've got biological samples on one side, the clinical data, so cognitive testing, demographic information, exposure-related information, brain imaging, all of these things that we're putting in one place so investigators can come and we can share this data with them that our veterans have been so gracious to allow us to share over the years. Here is our request sample form that investigators can come and put in a request, and it goes directly to our steering committee and our consumer advocates or our Gulf War veteran advocates also. We also have common data elements that we've been working on as part of the BBRAIN. And what is this? Why is this important? So we've worked on things such as cognitive tests. So if every study that's doing treatments is using a different cognitive test as their outcome, then we can't compare the studies directly. So it would be like comparing apples to oranges. So what we want to do is compare apples to apples in this field to speed up the progress with which we can understand biomarkers of the disorder and also treatments related to it. So we've recently published on common data elements related to cognitive outcomes, and the BBRAIN and the GWICTIC are working together to develop other common data elements. And this is freely available as well. In terms of recruiting for the BBRAIN study, we are trying to recruit 500 veterans to share their samples so that we can then share those with other studies. And this will include sites at Boston University, Miami VA and Nova Southeastern University, the Bronx VA, and the San Francisco VA. And we're actively recruiting right now for a one-day study for our veterans to come in and be a part of this repository network. We know in the past that there have not really been good repositories for Gulf War illness research, and we would like to rectify that. So what we need is our veterans' help to actually come and participate in these studies with us. And here's our website, which has the contact information for veterans to contact us. There is a telephone number at each of the sites, and there's also an email that you can contact us directly, and we will get back to you. So we're very, very interested in having our veterans come and participate with us. And I'd just like to take a moment to thank all of the veterans who have participated in our studies over the years. None of our studies would have been successful without veterans like yourself who've been willing to participate in these studies. And I thank you very much for doing that. It has made a very big difference. And although it's been 30 years, we've made incredible progress in our research, and we will continue to do that, working together in the scientific community to develop treatments and objective diagnostic tests for our ailing veterans. And with that, I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan, for that amazing update on the work that you're doing. Next, we're going to be hearing from Dr. Stephen Hunt. Dr. Hunt is the National Director of the VA Post-Deployment Integrated Care Initiative, providing leadership for the development and support of integrated post-combat care clinics in all VA medical centers nationally. Dr. Hunt has spent the past 25 years providing care for and conducting clinical trial research on combat veterans, including those from the 1990 to 1991 Gulf War. Dr. Hunt is also a clinical professor of medicine at the University of Washington School of Medicine in the Occupational and Environmental Medicine program, where he's developing strategies for approaching veteran healthcare issues from the perspective of military service as an occupation and combat as an environment. Dr. Hunt?
Greetings. My name's Steve Hunt. I'm a primary care provider from VA Puget Sound, and I've been taking care of Gulf War veterans since they first started coming back in the early 1990s. I want to thank Dr. Klimas and the Institute of Neuro-Immune Medicine for inviting me to participate today. And I particularly want to thank all of the veterans and their families that are attending. It's been 30 years now. It's been a long, difficult road for our Gulf War veterans, and our researchers and clinicians have worked very hard also to try to continue to learn more and to get better at taking care of you and your families. And I wanted to kind of look at research in terms of my own personal experiences. So back in 1992, I started seeing the first Gulf War veterans coming back. We had a large group from Washington State, National Guard. We had a Stryker Brigade, we had a field hospital, and these folks started coming back. And then also in 1992, we started having the Gulf War Registry. So as a clinician, I was seeing these veterans coming back. It was clear that they were having a difficult time. The term Gulf War illness was just starting to be used. And so my research, and I'm going to tell you about 5 papers that really emanated from my desire to figure out how do we do a better job of taking care of our Gulf War veterans. So the first paper was a paper looking at what did Gulf War veterans think was going on with them, and what did their clinical teams think was going on with them. And this paper was actually in the Archives of Internal Medicine, and it was called Clinician Beliefs about Gulf War illness. And we asked medical providers and we asked mental health providers, what do you think Gulf War veteran or Gulf War illness is? And what we found was the medical providers said, well, we think it's more likely a mental health condition. And the mental health providers said, we think it's more of a medical condition. And these were clinicians from VA Puget Sound, Portland, and Walter Reed. So these were good clinicians, smart, knew what they were doing, but it pointed out that we need a different paradigm in terms of how do we provide care. And the conclusion of the paper was that healthcare models for Gulf War veterans and others with symptom-based disorders necessitate collaborative interdisciplinary approaches. So we needed teams. So that's what I learned from that little piece of research. The next paper that I put out was about other populations that have medically unexplained symptoms. And what we found is that, of course, medically unexplained symptoms, things that look like Gulf War syndrome, are common in other populations as well. And what we found is that there were some factors that made it more difficult for certain individuals. There were certain predisposing factors that made unexplained illnesses more difficult. There were some precipitating factors, and there were some perpetuating factors. So this made us think about what can we do to kind of look at the unique aspects of each Gulf War veteran to help us better understand ways to kind of mitigate the problems they were having with their symptoms. The next study, which was a large randomized controlled trial, it was in JAMA, of exercise and cognitive behavioral therapy. So does exercise and cognitive behavioral therapy help with Gulf War illness syndromes? And what we found is that CBT and or exercise can provide modest relief of some of these symptoms. So we started to get an idea of, okay, there's some things we can do, even though we don't know the cause of what's going on, that will help a little bit. The next study was one about veterans' beliefs about what was happening to them, because it seemed very important that we, as we tried to figure out what might be causing Gulf War illness, that we paid attention to what our beliefs were. because if we were believing kind of the wrong thing, it could potentially have a negative impact on how we were going to do. So this was a paper in the Journal of Occupational and Environmental Medicine. And what it's concluded was there are several beliefs that made it perhaps more likely that a Gulf War veteran would do better or worse with their Gulf War illness. The next paper was in the Archives of Internal Medicine, or I'm sorry, General Internal Medicine. And that was about, so what's a good platform for taking care of Gulf War veterans? And essentially said integrated post-deployment care where everybody has a medical provider, a mental health provider, and a social worker. That's the fundamental team. Had we had that in place for Gulf War veterans, I personally feel we would have done a lot more, a lot better. So we've learned, we've gotten better, but we know that that's the best platform. The last paper was on mindfulness-based stress reduction and whether or not meditation of this sort could help with symptoms. And lo and behold, what we found is yes, it did. And that paper was actually in the Journal of Medicine. So in conclusion, the research I have done has been to try to figure out how can we do a better job of taking care of Gulf War veterans. So the research I'm kind of promoting here has to do with clinical trials, trying things that might help, helping us understand better what's going on with veterans, and how do we implement these on a large scale across the VA. And of course, the Institute for Neuro-Immune Medicine is doing a whole different sort of research. And when you put these together, hopefully we will better understand the pathophysiology of Gulf War veterans, and also will be able to take better care of them. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hunt. It's very interesting to be able to take all the research that's being done for Gulf War veterans, but be able to implement this to give veterans better care. Next, we're going to be hearing from Dr. Peter Rum. Dr. Rum serves as director of the pre-9/11 era environmental health services in the VA post-deployment health service, where he oversees several complex national programs dealing with environmental issues, health policy for veterans, which includes dealing with Agent Orange, Gulf War illness, and improving the registry exam process. Dr. Rum is a pediatrician, a board-certified preventative medicine physician. He is on the board of directors of the Johns Hopkins affiliated Tropical Medicine Society of Baltimore and serves as a voting delegate in the American College of Occupational and Environmental Medicine. Dr. Rum?
Hello, my name is Dr. Peter Rum. I work at the VA in post-deployment health service, which is the part of the VA that deals with exposure concerns in veterans. We have three parts of our office. One is an epidemiology program, one that does mostly the most recent wars called post 9/11, and I'm the director of the pre 9/11 program. We also have three large war-related illness, injury-related centers I'll talk about more in a few minutes, as well as a center in Baltimore that works with depleted uranium. Thank you all for your service, and for those that served during the Gulf War. I did not get into the Gulf itself, but I was deployed to Germany, where I took care of the injured soldiers, and then I went to the Kurdish border in Turkey and took care of some burn victims after the war. So I have a lot of sympathy and empathy for your work and what was going on. Most of our work with Gulf War veterans deals with Gulf War illness. About 30% of Gulf War veterans have this unexplained illness, also known as chronic multi-symptom illness. VA is on the forefront of a huge endeavor in this thing to actually, for the first time, come up with a better clinical definition of Gulf War illness. And I'll talk about that in more detail. But we're working with researchers from both academia, Department of Defense, and other experts to do this. We have interest in the Gulf War from our new incoming secretary, Secretary McCullough, as well as, McDougall, as well as other leaders in the VA. The bottom line is on the 28th, the VA Chief of Staff, John Jensen, will be talking at a memorial service for some Gulf War veterans and to other Gulf War veterans on behalf of our department. Most of the work in Gulf War illness happens in either my office or in the Benefits Administration, as well as in what's called the Office of Research and Development. we have interactions with the press and Congress on these issues all the time. We have 3 large registries. These are congressionally mandated databases, the largest of which is the Gulf War Registry that any veteran from the first Gulf War can join. But it's important to know that the veterans from the first Gulf War can also join the Airborne Hazards Open Burn Pit Registry, and that's the fastest growing registry. And we have made it with our programs to be able to get a veteran to have one exam for both registries. We also have a smaller registry for those who may have been either got toxic embedded fragments or depleted uranium from the first Gulf War. And you're also eligible to join those. And we strongly encourage you. These registries are free. The exams are free. You do not have to be part of the VH and the Veterans Health Administration or get benefits to get in there. And we strongly encourage you to get the exam and get enrolled. We do in our office a lot of things with the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. We've had 12 reports, the last of which was on intergenerational health effects, as well as one before that on airborne hazards, and prior report was on the Gulf War overall health status. I talked about the case definition. We have this huge project using artificial intelligence, primarily with West Virginia University, with data, but researchers all over the country and Department of Defense, as well as VA. We have a second project at our War-Related Illness and Injury-Related Center in New Jersey that's using a very sophisticated chart view process to look at. And we're going to get these 2 projects together with a group of experts and look at the data. And by the end of the year, we hope to have a new case definition for Gulf War illness. VA has many studies going on. We have one that's done over 15,000 Gulf War veterans since 1995. And we've had 30 peer-reviewed publications come out of that study. I mentioned earlier the depleted uranium program. They do a lot of research. And they're also so far, the good news out of that is most depleted uranium exposures, even toxic embedded fragments, there's only 5 veterans so far that have had a significant toxic exposure due to depleted uranium, but we continue to study that. I serve on a number of Gulf War review panels, as do other people, for the Department of Defense and or VA. And as we know, Gulf War has certain, with the benefits, has certain presumptions for unexplained medical illnesses, as well as for 9 infectious diseases. One of the most things, some of these areas have changed in the last few years, particularly with chronic fatigue syndrome and so forth. And we're working with the benefits and others to try and update and possibly relook at those areas again. We have a website which you can easily find just by going to the Office of Public Health at VA and typing in Gulf War, and a number of different these topics I've talked about before will come up. The bottom line is we do serve veterans. Just today I was on the phone with a veteran service organization to try and get some Gulf War veterans vaccines. And we are studying, particularly, we're going to be studying more COVID and possibly a COVID causing illness in Gulf War veterans. We plan to do some studies on that in the next year, a year and a half. So the bottom line is we thank you again for your service, and we hope that all of you stay well in the new year. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rum. And if you're interested, definitely check out the Office of Public Health at the VA and type in Gulf War illness to get more information from his link. And we look forward to hearing more about the Gulf War and COVID research you're going to be doing. The next speaker we'll be hearing from is Fianni Collado. She's a clinical operation nurse executive at the Miami VA Center and the Institute for Neuro-Immune Medicine. Ms. Collado has more than 10 years of experience in research with Gulf War veteran population and helps foster a supportive collaboration between our partners at Nova Southeastern University, Boston University, and more. Fanny?
Hi, my name is Fanny Collado, and I am the Clinical Operations Nurse Executive for the Gulf War Research under Nancy Klimas at the Miami VA. It is an honor to be a part of this event where we get to thank all of our Gulf War veterans for all of their service. I have been working with the Gulf War veteran population for over 10 years, and I must say that it has made my nursing career double rewarding. Gulf War research has come a long way since I started over 10 years ago. We have now moved to clinical trial and treatment studies for the Gulf War illness symptoms. We have numerous ongoing and upcoming studies in which I am extremely excited along with my colleagues to see them all unfold. We hope to keep you informed with all that we are doing regarding research and in ways that you can participate and be a part of what we're doing. Again, I would like to thank you all for your service, for what you've done and continue to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Fanny. Next, we'll be hearing from Amanpreet Cheema. Dr. Cheema is the Program Director of GWICTIC Research Operations at INIM, where she oversees the clinical research development, implementation, and operations. She serves as a Vice Chair on NSU's Institutional Review Board and has been engaged in review and regulatory oversight of human subject research. Additionally, Dr. Cheema holds an assistant professor position at INIM, Department of Nutrition and Science, and Halmos College of Natural Sciences and Oceanography, where she develops and teaches graduate and undergraduate level courses, as well as provides student research mentorship. Dr. Cheema?
My name is Dr. Amanpreet Cheema, and I'm a faculty at Nova Southeastern University's Institute of Neuro-Immune Medicine, which is a clinical and research center co-founded by Drs. Nancy Klimas and Marianne Fletcher in 2012 to bring together an interdisciplinary team of basic scientists, computational biologists, clinical investigators, and clinical care providers to expedite and integrate the work across disciplines, such as complex multi-symptom illnesses. One big initiative is the congressionally directed medical research program funded Gulf War Illness Clinical Trials and Interventions Consortium. I know it's a mouthful. We call it GWICTIC, which takes full advantage of the expertise and infrastructure that comes together from Institute of Neuro-Immune Medicine under Dr. Nancy Klimas's leadership, as well as two academic research institutes, Boston University, Cornell, and an international nonprofit research institute at RTI, two VA-related illness and injury centers, RISCs. One is at Palo Alto and other is at New Jersey. In addition, we joined forces with Houston VA and Miami VA to be able to provide the cutting edge research nationwide. We especially benefit from our close partnership with Committed Advocacy Committee and a National Central Recruitment Corps, who provides the consumer voice in research efforts and study design. This research team understands that Gulf War illness is a complex disease state, and it exists due to contributions from multiple organ systems. It is with this understanding that the treatment strategies under the nationwide collaboration relies on approaches that addresses more than a single mechanism of action. Specifically, these approaches address the chronic oxidative stress and neuroinflammation that leads to the multi-symptom illness. We are excited in 2021 as we are able to roll out 3 studies which have been developed utilizing this partnership within the consortium. The first study being implemented before summer of 2021 is an on-site South Florida-based study that comes from the modeling efforts of the team over the last 8 years or so. This group at Institute of Neuro-Immune Medicine has collected human data across different studies and used it in a dynamic model, which is using an exercise challenge. And they mapped out the cascades of events that resulted in relapse post-exercise. These models then were used to identify targets which were tested in animal models, and these animal models had an equivalent of 10 years of chronic illness. something similar to what we call an animal model world as Gulf War illness model. One combination which worked was using the etanercept applied to reduce the neuroinflammation, and followed by the glucocorticoid receptor antagonist mifepristone. We conducted a phase 1 proof of study concept and tested out one of the two strategies, which were identified by the dynamic modeling approach. And the current study that I'm just talking about using etanercept and mifepristone is ongoing, but the preliminary results showed promise. The second strategy is being implemented under GWICTIC, and this second strategy or the second study will use longer duration of etanercept followed by splitting the etanercept group to receive one out of the two mifepristone dosages. The second study being implemented in 2021 is a phase 2 study where we will use a generally recognized as safe nutraceutical called Bacopa monieri or Brummi in a well-controlled nationwide yet remote study. This Bacopa has been used for hundreds of years in India as Ayurvedic medicine for treatment of a variety of conditions. And some of those conditions, such as inflammation, cognitive function improvement, it overlaps with the symptomology of Gulf War illness. It has never been tested in Gulf War illness, so we will test the safety and efficacy in this illness. But it has been used in both elderly and young populations for inflammation, antioxidant, as an adaptogen, as well as it has been seen that using Bacopa in elderly patients improves the memory and processing of speed, the components of the cognitive function. What's important about this particular study is that it would entirely be conducted remotely. And we would bring the study to the consumers. They don't have to travel anywhere. Probably for the 2 blood draws that we have within the study, they might go to their nearby Quest location, for example, or if it's feasible, we can also send a phlebotomist to them. So it's a very interesting study because the design was developed keeping the issues the consumer faces in day-to-day life. So we are bringing the study to them. The third study we are implementing in 2021 is another phase 2 study using a powerful antioxidant called N-acetylcysteine, or in short, NAC. This has been used in different illnesses, and there is a current study being conducted in a similar illness called ME/CFS by our collaborators. And it's reported to promote the recovery of CNS from chronic oxidative stress and depletion of antioxidants that we see in Gulf War illness participants. Now, this study is also very interesting. It has both on-site component and it has remote components. This study will be the first study that will be rolled out at all our partnering sites. And it also has a subcomponent of imaging, which would be done at Palo Alto for some of the Palo Alto participants, whereas we have Cornell site on the East Coast, which will be the imaging site for some of the remote participants. So we're very excited to roll out these studies in 2021.
Thank you, Dr. Cheema, for your exciting work, and we're very happy to work with you here at INIM. Our last speaker is Dr. Nancy Klimas. Dr. Klimas is the director of the Institute for Neuro-Immune Medicine at Nova Southeastern University and professor and chair of the Department of Clinical Immunology at Nova Southeastern University College of Osteopathic Medicine. Dr. Klimas has achieved international recognition for her research and clinical efforts in multi-symptom disorders, myalgic encephalomyelitis, chronic fatigue syndrome, Gulf War illness, fibromyalgia. She's currently funded by the VA, the DoD, and NIH to study these complex disorders using a systems biology approach with a strong focus on illness models that lead to therapeutic targets in clinical trials. I've also worked with Dr. Klimas for over 25 years, and I think she is one of the most amazing people I have ever worked with, and it's an honor to work with her each and every day. Dr. Klimas?
Welcome, and we're all so excited that we're putting on this virtual celebration to honor you, the veterans that served in the Gulf War. And because of that, and in part because this is the 30th year anniversary of the end of the Gulf War, we thought we'd put on this virtual celebration. As all of you know, the first Gulf War had health consequences, and roughly 1 in 3 veterans today that served in the Gulf remain ill from an illness that seems to have resulted from their exposures to so many toxins during the course of their service there in the Gulf. And our group, we're knee deep, neck deep in trying to solve that problem and come up with effective therapies that could make your lives much better. We have a lot of concerns about these toxic exposures and what they mean to your health. And one is the misery index that people live with because of this illness, Gulf War illness. But the other is that living in a chronic illness state for years and years and years can affect what happens to you later on. And now people are in their 50s, some of you all in your 60s. And we're very, very keen to try to make sure that the interventions that are coming down the pike get to you in time to prevent you from having longer term and possibly even more serious health problems down the road. So we are passionately engaged in trying to get to those answers for you. And by we, I mean the investigators here at the Institute for Neuro-Immune Medicine. We have investigators at the Miami VA and at Nova Southeastern University working in partnership to try to get to the bottom of all this and then move some basic science past the bench and into the clinical space so that we can actually help you with this illness and get to it. We've made an enormous amount of headway, and we're already in clinical trials, phase 1, phase 2, even phase 3 clinical trials, meaning that we're from the very first time we touch a human with this idea all the way through the validation steps that actually put it into the VA formulary and provide to you interventions that are effective. So that's exciting. And part of the reason why we created this institute, this great big gang of scientists and clinicians, was so that we would be very effective at doing that. Sometimes the biggest problem in doing science is that genius ideas die on the bench, even though they're amazing and good and really mean something, because there was no connection to the clinic. The scientists didn't know how to move it on and get it all the way through the process. But happily, our group is pretty savvy about getting things moved on and all the way to the point of understanding VA policies that would actually get it into the formulary. So we're excited that we have engaged in this process, and we're trying so very hard to get there for you. We have exciting research, and I don't know if you're aware of everything we're doing, and it would take way longer than 5 minutes to describe it. But basically, we've merged a group of scientists that are doing laboratory science to understand what the underlying mediators of this illness are. What are the chemicals that are circulating? What are the cells doing? What's the energy of the cell doing? All those types of things. And we're handing that data off to these computational medicine experts. Dr. Craddock leads our team, and he takes that information and basically uses supercomputing and some really cool complicated ways of taking amazing amounts of data. Give you an example. We have one study where we hand him 9 million bits of data on an individual, and he puts that into a computational platform using supercomputers, sort of Watson kind of stuff, and creates models of the illness that does a lot more than explain why people stay ill. It also predicts how to make them well. And that is what we're doing. And that is so cool. So we're already doing phase. We've moved that from the bench through the computers to animal models. We were successful curing a bunch of mice. And then we moved it on to the human clinical trials. And the first of those studies is just finishing now. The second study is just starting up. We're already funded to move it through to the placebo control study that has to follow, the phase 2 study. Wow. How cool is that? That not only are we doing cool work, but the people who fund it, the peer review that's involved in that, recognizes how exciting this work is and has funded the promise of it. And we're grateful for that opportunity to help you. We're grateful to you because we recognize that you're the advocates that made that money available, and that you pounded on the doors of Congress, and you every single year went back and said, this is important, things are moving. So I like to say things are moving. Thank you. And we plan to keep it going. We plan to get it all the way through to the end so that you have these interventions available to you. And of course, we're always improving. The models get better and better. So our models would start out kind of all Gulf-4 glommed together. We've now discovered that there's subgroups that are different, and that their treatments are different, that men, shocking, are different than women. Who would have thought that? The computer figured that out for us. How about that? But more importantly, that the woman intervention is different than the male intervention. That when you have another illness at the same time, say you have coexisting PTSD, very common in veterans, that sort of changes the model and changes the intervention. So how cool is it? This is so fine-tuned that we're creating interventions that are personalized, that are describing you yourself, what your personal intervention is supposed to look like, and then dreaming up ways to move that all the way through the usual process that has to be done to actually deliver the goods, if you would, across all the VAs and not just research sites. So that's what we're doing. I hope you're as excited as we are. We really made this little event happen for you in this virtual time, at a time when it's not safe to gather, to make sure that this 30-year anniversary didn't go by without something to recognize that we know it's been 30 years. We get it. And we know you've been suffering for a long time. And we are trying our darndest to make sure that you don't have to suffer decades further. So thank you again for your service. Thank you for your faith and your trust in our group and other groups that are doing this amazing work. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Klimas. It is actually an honor to work with you. I've been working with Dr. Klimas. It's come to be 25 years. And I love the work that we do each and every day. And I also want to thank our amazing group of speakers today. Hearing our speakers talk about the extensive efforts to learn, understand, and better treat Gulf-4 illness is incredibly inspiring. To be able to take all clinical research and be able to implement this to take better care of our Gulf-4 veterans. We do want to have you know that we haven't forgotten about you. Next, we're going to be moving to our live Q&A, and I'd like to invite our speakers to turn on their cameras while we kick it off, and we're going to be answering some of the questions that have come in during the session. Okay, actually, I'm going to start us off with, we had a question, I think maybe Dr. Rum might be the first person to lead us off with. Thomas Cesario asked, are there any studies that are looking at long-term exposures of sarin gas? Dr. Rum, do you know of any studies?
I think Dr. Sullivan may also respond.
Okay.
VA did commission the National Academies to do one of their volumes of the Gulf-4 series on sarin gas. And this question comes up frequently. There have been many studies. There was a demolition that occurred after the war, what's called Camasia, that affected about 100,000 plus veterans. And one paper that came out from our office suggested possibility of early brain cancer in the first 5 years after the war from that exposure. But then subsequent papers looking farther out did not show that. But we're continuing to look at that question. And I can tell you, we expect, because the president's son died of a brain cancer after a post 9/11 thing, that brain cancer may become a particular issue. Sarin gas, as far as Gulf War illness, it's been raised by many as a possibility, because some of the features that come up in some of the symptoms and signs of Gulf War illness seem to fit possible exposure to chemical sensitivity. Again, though, the national academies had basically insufficient evidence to say one way or another in their most recent report on that. They did another review of the science several years later that basically came to the same conclusion. But there are those that continue to investigate the possibility that sarin gas, or some other chemical agent could have been a factor in Gulf War illness. I don't know if Dr. Sullivan wants to say anything more, maybe.
Yes, Dr. Rum, thank you. Thanks for that nice overview of some of the research that's been done. And I will also note that our group at Boston University actually did one of the very earliest studies on sarin exposure in brain imaging. And what we found was that we got a list of who was exposed, potentially exposed to sarin as part of those, the burn pit, the explosions that happened at Camisea that Dr. Rum mentioned. And what we found was that veterans who were exposed to the Camisea area actually had lower white matter volumes in their brain, and they had larger ventricles in their brain imaging. And that was in a dose-dependent manner, so that the more sarin exposure they had, the more effects we saw on the brain imaging. And this was in the Fort Devens cohort. So this is a group of veterans that came back from the war through Fort Devens, Massachusetts, and we've actually followed this group now for 25 years. And we've been following that group who's also been exposed to sarin and looking at other health outcomes they have. And we're hoping to have a couple of publications coming out soon to show there are additional health-related effects from that group who has the sarin exposure. So yes, the answer is we do believe that sarin is related to some of the symptoms we're seeing in our Gulf War veterans. We're trying to follow up with other cohorts to validate this as well.
Thank you, Dr. Rum.
If I could add to that, I think there continues to be modeling and studies done in this. There's also an investigator, Dr. Chow, out in California, has done similar studies with the brain, and continues to do some research in that area. I think one thing we have right now, I forgot to mention this, I believe, in my talk on what we're doing in our office and what VA is doing, is going forward for future deployments. And they're trying to get some of the data back from the Gulf War too. They've created what's called the Individual Longitudinal Exposure Record, or ILR. And this is a big DoD VA project that actually was launched and people have been trained on and will go live this year. And this, for the first time, will give a comprehensive record. It's a multi-page record to a provider that a veteran there's a congressional will also be able to access soon, to get a report on what they might have been exposed to, and it will tie in all our registries together to try and look across board to try and come up with some things that may actually provide a solution to what people are actually exposed to and what they eventually had an outcome to. So the ILR is something you'll hear about going forward, and is very important. It really has been needed, honestly, for many years, and it took many. I was back in Bosnia and developed a surveillance center system when I was in the military. We just didn't have the capability to the IT and technology to do such a thing. But there really has been some movement with DoD and VA and congressional interest to develop this thing, which will actually track what a veteran is actually exposed to as a soldier or as an airman or in the Navy, and actually then what they might develop later in life. So it's really moving along.
Okay, thank you so much. I have a couple questions about how to get in contact with the virtual studies, and we're gonna be put up a slide that's gonna have that information. You're also gonna receive an email with the information for each of the research programs that are happening right now. There is a question Dr. Klimas, if you want to take a stab at that, about is the VA looking to hire any more information on neuroimmune or functional medicine specialists who could treat veterans with Gulf War illness, chronic fatigue, et cetera?
So that's an interesting question, and we struggle with that locally at our VA as well as nationally. Dr. Hunt, who's on here, established one of the earliest clinics in the VA. And from his clinic, actually, he established a model that has been embraced by all of the VAs in terms of how primary care should be more teamed and interactive with the other specialties. So Stephen's been like, leading the way from the very first day on trying to help all of the VAs and not just his own VA be responsive to people that have complex medical illnesses coming back from the military service. And I really appreciate that, Steve. You've been amazing from the first day. I think one of the most promising things in the VAs that I'm seeing is, and it's just beginning to take a role in here, is using integrative medicine practices in the VA, because actually that is what is most effective for what we have right now for treating Gulf War illness, is integrative or functional medicine approaches, because they really understand the concept of energy at a cellular level, which is really broken in Gulf War, and they understand brain inflammation, which is a part of the process in Gulf War. So right now, from a very practical way, if I had Gulf War, my provider would be an integrative medicine doctor. So if a VA has that kind of service, and many of them now do, and there is, a real effort at the central office level to roll out a better effort at offering integrative medicine. I think that that's probably the best place people could go right now. I've made an effort to try to get more environmental medicine clinics going. And honestly, that's been a bit of a struggle. But I mean, really, it's sort of provider specific, and does a local VA have someone like that? And those of us that have sat on these advisory committees have listened to many hours of testimony from veterans, very, very frustrated that they haven't been able to find a local expert when they walk through the door at a VA that can deal with them. So finally, when you are at an impasse and you don't find help at your local VA, Congress has put a ridiculous amount of money into community care. And your VA is allowed to send you out into the community to receive care if you can't find it at your local VA. I hate to think a military exposure would have to go to the community to find care. The experts should be at the VA. That's our duty. That's what we're supposed to be doing at the VAs, caring for veterans. And it's a very veteran-centric kind of thing. Nonetheless, I can't think of a community that doesn't have at least some integrative medicine specialists really close by that you could ask for a consult through community care to be seen and managed by an integrative medicine doctor in the community if you cannot find one in your local VA. That would be my personal advice. I'm not speaking for the VA. This is Nancy talking, but I think that makes good sense to me right now.
That sounds great. Our next question is, I think, Dr. Sullivan, this might be a good question for you. It comes from Susan Mitchell. I'm a 58-year-old female. I started having seizures in 2002. They got to the point where they were uncontrollable in 2017. My civilian neurologist in UAB and works with the surgeon looked into my hippocampus, and she goes on and on about it, but she's asking, are there any studies that might be good for her that she can get into? I know that you were not answering personal questions. People could reach in to the panelists if you have a specific question, but in a general way, are there any studies that you can think of or any of the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so in a general way, we try to keep the criteria for Gulf War illness really strict and tight so that we're not including other disorders. So for example, if someone has other disorders that could be accounting for their symptoms, we want to try to not have those folks necessarily participate in the research so that we can have a clean sample so we understand, what's causing it and then for treatment for it. That doesn't mean that this research won't help those other veterans who have other comorbid conditions. So if you have, something like dementia, or if you have epilepsy or other things, sometimes you would be excluded, particularly from things like imaging studies or some biomarker studies or some cognitive studies. That said, it really depends on the study, what criteria would be used and who might be able to qualify for those studies. So in a general sense, to answer some questions like that. That said, I'm happy to follow up with any veterans who have specific questions about whether you'd qualify for some of the studies. We also, just in general, have some survey studies that we're doing right now of women veterans' health outcomes that are open to all women veterans. So that's something that this particular veteran and others might think about.
That sounds great. And actually, we've had a couple of emailed questions on dealing with exercise. So we brought in Jeff Quinor, who's our exercise physiologist. We try to consolidate them, but mostly my symptoms get worse when I exercise, and should I avoid it?
Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you very much. Yes, my name is Jeff. I'm the exercise physiologist that works with Dr. Klimas's group. And I do get that question quite a bit in terms of, exercise and, should I be doing it if it ends up making me worse? And, the seemingly obvious answer would be no, you shouldn't. But in all reality, it really depends on your definition of the word exercise. And that's one of the things that I've really been trying to work on. When we look at exercise in general, that has a very ambiguous definition. So, it could be anything from taking your dog for a walk all the way up to running, sprinting, cycling, whatever the case may be. And there's a lot of space between any of those activities and what we consider to be the baseline, which is simply just lying down, face up, awake and alive. And what we see is that if we can actually find a way to get someone exercising, get someone being just generally active, without getting them into a point where they're going to, fall over that cliff into, causing all of these inflammatory cascades and all the neurological symptoms that, everyone's, been amazing in talking about this whole time. If we can find ways to do exercise that is not necessarily in that realm and slightly less intense than that, then we can train your body how to utilize the right levels of metabolism. We can train your body how to exercise appropriately and not have those hyperreactions. In doing so, the answer to your question is yes, you should be exercising, but you have to redefine that word so that it's not as intense. Even just sitting here as I'm kind of talking and moving my arms around, it counts as some level of physiological exercise. So as we do all of our research studies at the Miami VA, we are able to do these exercise physiology tests where we see exactly how metabolism is reacting. And then from there, we can give you specific advice. I know we're not doing that again today, but we can give you specific advice as to how to best perform exercise or activity that's appropriate for you.
Wouldn't you say, Jeff, that in general, your advice would be not to go for endurance exercise, but to do short, small bits of what you can do and have time to recover between each effort? Would that be fair? Yeah. So, fair. I mean, a lot of our guys have drill sergeants in their heads saying, go, 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 go. And it's really hard to break that cycle of trying to go 5 minutes, 10, 15, 20. Instead, consider doing whatever you can do without relapsing, 1, 2, 3, 5 minutes. And then take some time, let your heart rate go all the way down, let your body recover before you do another 1, 2, 3, 5 minutes, whatever your body tolerates, and just do little bits and increase the number of times you do it rather than the amount that you do. That's very practical advice.
It's very practical advice. And the one thing that I will say about that is whenever I do an exercise prescription for any of our veterans, I always look at two very specific variables. I look at the intensity and the volume. So, we could say, okay, do 1 minute of exercise, but if that 1 minute of exercise ends up being too intense, it could actually be worse for someone than 5 minutes of exercise that's not intense at all. So we look at, there's a metric that we call MET minutes, which is essentially how we quantify exercise using this value called METs. And then we can calculate the amount of time that they've spent at whatever intensity volume. So yes, I usually try to keep those minute prescriptions low, but I do that both by doing what you're saying, Dr. Klimas, where I'm keeping the amount of time that they're spending in there, but also in very importantly, trying to keep the intensity at a point where they're not, exceeding any levels of thresholds or anything like that that would be inappropriate for them to do so. So yes, I like the idea of about doing. I usually tend to prescribe like low intensity interval training. So it's just about 30 seconds. I start off usually about 30 seconds of doing some level of higher intensity, which in and of itself isn't all that high. But then I do that, have someone take a break, do another 30 seconds, have someone take a break. That only ever adds up to being a few minutes, but it ends up training their aerobic systems in a really, really good and efficient way in the meantime.
Okay, well, I'm gonna have to unfortunately start cutting us off because we've gone a little bit over our scheduled time, but I'm gonna make two quick announcements and ask one last question of our panelists. One is that somebody asked about benefits with Gulf War, and I got an email that December 31st is the last day to file for Gulf War Desert Storm issues. And I know that some of the veterans are working with senators and congressmen to see if they could put a bill to extend that cutoff time. And the last question I'm going to end off with, and I'm going to let the panels handle it, is there's a question about for Gulf War illness, should veterans get the COVID vaccine? We'll end up
Oh, good question. I love this question.
Let me take the first crack on that because I know Dr. Klimas has put some stuff out. We are actually going to be doing some studies to look at COVID and Gulf War using data in the healthcare utilization. So I think the bottom line answer is the answer is not been scientifically proven, but as Dr. Klimas, I think we'll talk about, there may be some reasons for certain veterans to consider it. I personally have been contacted by some Gulf War. I just gave my email out to somebody in the box. A veteran had a situation, felt they were at higher risk, and it sounded like they might be in a situation. And I contacted the chief of staff, was able to get those veterans, several veterans at a place, the vaccine. So I think it's the bottom line is it's not fully, the answer is not fully, the VA's position and the answer is not fully been shown evidence. And we think but certainly any veteran who's got chronic conditions and meets the CDC guidelines and is older would get them. And then we believe that providers should guide the veterans into making that decision.
Yeah, and I'm going to agree in general with that. You need some provider help with this decision. But I mean, COVID's killing people. I know of a physician who declined his vaccine in January and he's dead today in a week. Took 1 week. I mean, that's crazy. So people with Gulf War illness have a state of chronic immune activation. That means your immune system's already sort of charged and ready to go. It puts you at higher risk, at least in a hypothetical. We don't have the data to support it yet, but my immunology brain says people with this type of situation, they were at higher risk to have a more severe course with COVID. And so I am strongly recommending the vaccine with some little hashtags. The hashtag is a little, be careful, because there are some people that have marked vaccine responses before. You don't tolerate the flu vaccine or something like that. And those folks, if they're going to get this vaccine, may have to have a provider help them get safely through it, even to the point where we're using something like steroids to blunt the immune response, which actually may blunt your vaccine response. So it's a catch-22 where you try to make it safer, but still get the vaccine, hoping you get enough benefit from that vaccine. There's also different vaccines coming out, and some of them are more immunologically powerful than others. And so some people are willing to live inside their bubble waiting for more vaccines to come out, hoping for some that are less immunologically big kick vaccines. But all the vaccines we have right now are big kick, highly immunogenic vaccines. The Pfizer, the Moderna, and now the new Johnson & Johnson vaccine that was approved yesterday. So on our webpage, I have a little thing that I wrote that says, there's things you can do to make it safer. There's some herbal things you can do to quiet the level of severity of an immune response to a vaccine without blunting the actual vaccine response. But in a serious situation, people that have actually had serious vaccine responses, perhaps in order to safely take it, you might need a course of steroids, knowing that you won't have as good an immune response to the vaccine as the people that were in the original studies. Oh, by the way, we can measure that. There are antibody tests to see if you had a vaccine response.
I did want to jump in real quick also about that 2000, about the thing that the Gulf War presumptions would end this year. I can rest assured that issue is, we're aware of that VA. The Research Advisory Committee, which Dr. Hunt serves on, is aware of it. Our office is aware of it, and senior leadership's aware of it. So I expect, and VBA is also aware of it, the benefits. I expect that Congress and others will be reaching out to us, and at least from a scientific view, I reviewed the literature on that this past week to give proof, and there is no definite end to the start date when people get Gulf War illness. Dr. Climas may chime in. So based on that, my recommendation, which Dr. Hastings, my office endorsed, was to do an extension of the thing. Now, that depends on Congress to do it, and we'll need to go up through leadership to get it done. But I expect that it's at some point that very likely will happen.
It makes sense, even in this sense that the people with the milder forms of Gulf War illness may not even recognize they have it, have not been in the registry, have not sought care, and yet they may be at risk for long-term sequelae. And so it makes a lot of good sense to extend that. I would absolutely concur.
Absolutely. And I would just concur with that, just saying that those who have retired recently from the military also have been, some of them struggling with these symptoms for a long time, and now will start seeking treatment and that kind of thing. So,
and I will tell you, I know, Kimberly, you've also been involved with the Gulf War Research Advisory Committee. Dr. Block's not on this forum, but she's a great federal leader of that. And she emailed me and listened to this and appreciative of what people said. They will have a veterans engagement session again at the next Research Advisory Committee. It's on the internet. And I would encourage veterans to call into those sessions and give their viewpoints on this and other things, because VA listens. When we hear that something comes in from a veteran, it does get the attention of leadership in VA about a concern, and things do get acted on.
If I could just circle back one more second to the vaccine issue. I will say that at least in the Boston area, the VA is doing an incredible job vaccinating our veterans. And now they're down to 50 plus. So that includes many Gulf War veterans are able to now get vaccinated, at least in the Boston area. And I hope it's throughout the country at this point. So I would encourage veterans to think about that and talk with their primary care about whether they're good candidates for that. But it's truly amazing how available VA has made this vaccine to our veterans. I think that's a really wonderful thing.
I've personally done over 500 shots myself.
Wow.
I'll be working the clinic next week again.
That's great, Peter.
And I've only had 2 mild issues. I know what Dr. Klimas said, but I've had over 500 people, either observing or giving vaccines during the time I've been there. And these were things like people feel a little dizzy or something. We've had no serious complications. So I strongly encourage anybody who can get the vaccines, unless they have what Dr. Klimas says, to get them.
Yeah, I agree. And I have to say, I got the COVID vaccine with very little problem. And then I got the shingles vaccine and just was knocked out for 3 days. Darn. So I want to take a quick moment and thank Liz, Sarah, who has not shown her face, but put this whole video thing that we did ahead of time together. And Precious, who's on the screen right here. Precious has been working with us for years now and is moving into another area of research, still doing a little bit with us, but she's going to be doing some other stuff. And I just want to thank her personally and everyone on this panel for all that you do for our veterans with Gulf War. And from me to you veterans, it's an honor and a privilege to be able to be doing this.
Well, thank you so much. We've reached the end of our cast. I'm gonna ask all the speakers to turn off their cameras so that we could do a conclusion, but we could still answer your questions and answers. Most of all, I want to thank you, the viewers, for attending, and just want to let you know that this video is going to be available on the INIM YouTube channel. You're also going to get a link. And thank you so much for the privilege of your time today, and I do want to thank Precious and Sarah who put this all together. In the coming days, you're going to be receiving an email that will include all the links to the recordings, information about the different studies, and the panelists that were here today. Thank you so much.